Welcome to ALC Chats, a podcast series developed and produced by the Ageless Living Collaborative. I'm Phoebe Stein, president of Olive Presents and co-founder of the Ageless Living Collaborative. Ageless Living Collaborative is dedicated to optimizing the lives of seniors and giving them the information and tools to live their best lives. The mission of ALC is to listen, educate, inspire, and influence positive change for seniors and those who support the aging community. ALC Chats is another platform to reach those interested in supporting seniors, be it in senior living or aging in place. ALC Chats comes to you as a podcast and in some cases a vodcast. You can find ALC content on our website, www.agelesslivingcollaborative.org, or by following us on social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and on our own YouTube channel. Whichever place you follow us, we're happy you've chosen to join us. And now, we welcome our featured guest. Good morning. Today we have Jane Rohde with us. Jane is the founder of Live Together, a not-for-profit organization that she will speak to in a little bit, as well as principal of JSR Associates. Jane, welcome to ALC Chats. Today we are going to demystify what the various typologies in senior living are beyond the typical well-known independent assisted and memory care living communities. There's so many more beyond that, and we're going to try and unpack it all.
Thanks, Phoebe. It's great to be here as always. I love talking with you. It's always fun to be part of the Ageless Living Collaborative. And I'm looking forward to talking to the different typologies because, as you know, I believe in almost all the alternatives. So let's talk through those and see if we can shed a little bit of light on what they all mean.
That sounds perfect. And I'm right with you. I like a lot of the alternatives. And I think when people hear what's out there and what's available to them, they may choose those as well. Maybe the best way to go through this is kind of the ABCs. I know that we should probably also share with people, because there's a term with acronyms that's bantered around a bit, and we should probably start with CCRC. What does that mean? What is the benefit and the limitation? And then let's move away from the traditional and go into these real alternatives. So why don't you tell everybody what a CCRC really is and what it's intended to do?
Okay, so CCRC is a continuing care retirement community. It's also called a life plan community. And the different acronyms over time, it's kind of evolved in the life plan. Basically means that you pay a very large deposit typically to move into independent living, and then you move through the continuum of care. So assisted living, memory care, and also skilled nursing. So there's a grouping of folks that have traditionally always gone into the continuing care retirement community business. That's where I started my career, actually. I worked at Erickson Retirement Communities for about 8 years when they were very small, and really they're, that little inaugural building that was sitting there in the middle of the campus that we all worked out of. There was 8 of us. When I stopped working at Erickson, there was about 285 people there. And they've continued to develop over time into various models and things, but still providing that full continuum of care. So what that means is someone usually, as a typical resident, would move in from their home. They'd sell their home. They use that money for their deposit, and they would go into independent living, sometimes it's a villa, sometimes it's a townhouse, sometimes it would be an apartment. Then from an apartment living, if they're healthy and they can manage, they can stay there forever if they would like to. They don't need any higher level of assistance. Then if not, if you do have assisted living, you need a smaller environment. That would be if you have mobility issues, or if you start to have some cognitive decline and you need some reminders and you need, a little bit of help with medications, making sure 3 meals a day are eaten, things like that. You would move into assisted living and sometimes into memory care, depending on the level of cognitive decline. And then for skilled nursing, it's really when you need 24/7 care. And that's the only way that it can be provided. I've known residents who were completely cognitively intact, but they lived in the nursing home because my friend Miriam Sosnowski, for example, had a right side stroke, and it impacted her right side. And so she was really a dead weight in a wheelchair. So she needed assistance to get to transfer, to move, to dress, things like that. So she could still go over to the other side of the campus and have lunch and, things like that when she was able to. She was one of my favorite residents, actually. And then the skilled nursing side too also is reimbursed. So it is one of the few segments in the assisted living and independent living world that's reimbursed. So it's reimbursed through Medicaid, and then other services that are needed, like rehabs. Let's say you go into the nursing home short term. So you could have broken a hip, got the hip repaired, came back and needed to go into rehab for, I don't know, up to 90 days, 60 days to basically get yourself going again. So I think from the rehab perspective, you would stay there, and then you potentially go back to your independent living apartment or your assisted living apartment. And that would be covered through Medicare, which is more of your doctor's bills and things like that are covered by the Medicare part of CMS.
Well, that's interesting. What about those folks who really fall in a middle market? Would they have an opportunity to go into a CCRC, or is that a more elevated or more affluent option?
It depends on the continuing care retirement community. There's very, very high-end ones like Inspire that's in New York City. If you're talking $25,000 a month. And then you can go down to sort of your regular, more everyday, like Erickson always, for example, always advertised theirs as more of a middle market, little middle high market. A lot of folks too don't necessarily have that deposit. If you don't have an asset to sell, then you don't really have something to be able to back that deposit unless you have a lot of extra money or retirement saved. So I think that, like Hawthorne, for example, where our friend Kevin Swanson works, I think that he has kind of that middle market that has assisted living, memory care, and independent living.
Right.
Maybe slightly smaller. You might not have quite as much service. It's a little bit scaled back from the very elaborate continuing care retirement communities. So it still gives you a bit of continuum, but it does not have a skilled nursing component. So if you needed that higher level of care, you would need to go into a third-party nursing home. So that's
Okay.
usually missing. But there's other options for the middle market. That's what we've been exploring through Live Together, because we think that intergenerational living is one alternative to that, where you could actually be living where you're somewhat interdependent with your neighbors, and it's programmed around that. So it encourages the intergenerational interaction, because that's part of our problem, is that we have you can't just co-locate and expect people to just immediately hit it off and, you're having dinner every night together. So it takes time to form friendships and create that. So there's some staffing that you work toward to create actual programs that help people get to know each other. I took a art class yesterday, and it was interesting. This one lady had been coming to art classes for 15 years. And I thought, wow, that's cool. They have a whole little group of them, right? So that was a naturally occurring, if you will, group that now has gotten together. And apparently they have another little group that gets together that drinks wine. So I was in favor of that group. The evaluation. But I think
That's great.
I think that's part of that middle market, maybe solution for more affordability.
Okay, great. So I just want to make sure that when we're touching on the options, that we're really trying to provide options for people at various levels as we talk about them today. I think that one of the things that I always have been fond of since I learned about it was the small house model, which is something that almost nobody knows about. And I start talking about it and they want to know more. So I'm thinking maybe you can talk to that.
Yeah, happy to. So the small house model is kind of interesting. I have a client that I worked with in China for a number of years, and he was listening to a very close colleague of mine, David Green, present at like Malta or something. He'd come from China to Malta to hear, and learn about it. He didn't know anything about senior living, but he knew that China had this huge population that was growing, and we needed to do something with this one child, things like that. So he's listening to David, and he's talking about, well, you get up when you want to, you eat what you want to, you sleep in your own room, you have your own private bathroom, and Mark's confused because he's like, well, isn't that just living? Like, isn't that just make sense? And what we've done is we've institutionalized and it basically incarcerated our older population because nursing homes were never meant to be someplace where you lived. They were there for temporary care. They were modeled after acute care hospitals. And I don't know about you, but I would not want to live in an acute care hospital. And that's basically what they were modeled after. They were institutions. So they're institutionalizing people in nursing homes. So the household movement actually started with the Eden alternative model, which was something that Dr. Bill Thomas, amazing man, great thinker, and just amazing to look at it and go, yeah, something's really wrong here. He was a physician and he realized that the reason people were dying in nursing homes was not because of disease. They were dying because there was nothing to do. There was no purpose. There was nothing to engage them. There was nothing to make life livable. And so he started changing that. He started putting pets in, like cats and dogs and birds and all kinds of animals. And then he started doing after school programs. So kids would get off the bus every day at the nursing home as though it was a community center. He just started doing things that were part of normal life, baking bread. So the smells would make it feel like more like someplace you wanted to live. Baking cookies, it's kind of like the old vanilla on the light bulbs in the real estate market. It's the same kind of idea. It's like, how do you stimulate that? And so the interesting thing is, though, is he finally realized that, because people would ask questions like, well, where does the litter box go and stuff like that. And he goes, well, you just got to work around it. But the problem is that the institutional environment of having that long corridor with rooms on every side, a double-loaded corridor, became a limitation because they live like that. So he started looking at a smaller household model, and he got a group down in Tupelo, Mississippi, to actually look at that. And I remember Steve, the guy who was running it, was like, he bought into the Bill Thomas idea. So they basically built a number of homes. They did 10-person homes. They tried 12, I think. They've tried different sizes, things like that. And they moved the residents that were in the institutional setting into the household. The outcomes, there's this old video that I'm sure is around somewhere in a recording on YouTube that actually shows the greenhouse project where people are being deinstitutionalized. The people who hadn't walked for years were walking. People who hadn't spoken. There's this one video scene where this woman starts singing. She hadn't spoken for like 15 years. Wow. So, I mean, the outcome was really amazing. A couple of the residents were a little bit lonelier because they liked the bigger group because I think they were more social. So then they had to start looking at how do we address that. And they had something called convivium, which meant basically another kind of semi-made up term, that basically you all come around a main table and you have a meal together. And whoever's there eats with you. So whether it's staff or family or whatever, they all come together. So he's kind of the one that kind of started the push. In the meantime, around the country, people like David Green, Gaius Nelson, Adi Abashishe, others were looking at this idea of smaller environments. So that was the brand name version, is the Greenhouse Project, but the small house or household has been around quite a long time in terms of evaluating it. They've been doing it in England for years, like way before that happened for the Greenhouse Project. So as we look at the household models, it can be part of a continuing care retirement community. It can be standalone. We've even taken a very large Jewish center up in Massachusetts and started looking at how do we recompartmentalize an institutional building into households, right? How do you do little separate, distinct kitchens and distinct living rooms? So it's basically creating a house and people have bedrooms that are attached to that house.
I love it. I love it. It's like the old person version of a commune. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah. And it works. We've seen really good outcomes. When in China, we saw really good outcomes as well. We had households of 8. We used for rehab. There was a lot of different things, good things that came out of it. And there's early adopters as anything. But I'm still amazed that anyone would build a standard nursing home without looking at it. So in the guidelines, we have guidelines that are used for code, that are design guidelines that are now going to be called the FGI code book because they've shifted to a code book and a handbook structure for 2026. That's the licensing information that talks about the buildings themselves. And we wrote it when we started the 2014 version. We wrote it in a way to almost make you feel guilty if you didn't look at a household or a neighborhood instead of only looking at an institutional nursing home. And so
Well, it also feels a lot more curated where people can kind of fill in um, where others, don't necessarily do something, but they all meld together. There's somebody's going to contribute something different, each person, and it's going to make a whole. And I love the idea that they get to contribute to their community and they're not just passengers in life. They actually are participating still. And that's going to give them purpose, right? That's going to make them feel good about who they are and what they're doing. And of course that's got to improve an outcome. It's got to.
yeah. And it's interesting because we were talking about this the other day, but I was at the doctor with my mom. My mom is going to be 86. And I found that the doctor started talking to me instead of talking to her. And they would talk really loud. My mother has better hearing than I do. And I'm like, you don't need to yell at her, and you can ask her directly. And if she doesn't know, she'll look at me and ask.
Right.
And, because it's amazing to me, people will say, oh, they're nonverbal, or, oh, old people don't eat very much, or whatever it might be. I've seen my parents chow down when it's something that they really like, or that they have a question, or they can choose. And if you're nonverbal, you can still show somebody something they can point. It takes a little more time. It takes a little more patience. And it also takes, like, the Greenhouse Project is now called Aging in the Center for Innovation. And I think that they really have helped me better understand through their person-directed living certificate program and other things that they offer. But I think they've helped me understand how patient a person needs to be. And caregivers are not taught that. They're taught clinical and how to take care of somebody from a personal needs perspective. They're not usually given the time or the breadth to get to know somebody. And I think that that's what the small house does as well, because you have assigned staff to an assigned household. You assign to certain people. You get to know those people. If you have a
Right.
caregiver come into your home, it's really hard if it's not a fit, and usually it's not a fit.
People go through one after another until they find the right fit. And so this is far superior. That's a great model. Well, that's one of my favorites, but there's so many more. So let's kind of go down this list of options that people could actually look into. When somebody says, what are you going to do with your mother or with your father? And they're all alone, but they shouldn't be. And where might they enjoy? And that's a real question. Where might they enjoy being if they can't be with you, and we moved away from that model decades ago. We're coming back to it for a lot of folks, but by and large moved away from it. So, nobody wants to be in a holding pen. So what are some other options?
So one of the other options there's two pathways I'm going to talk about here. One is the actually doing residential assisted living. It is very similar to the household model that we just talked about. The difference is residential assisted living comes from the idea of having a single family home and adding service. So most of the folks are smaller developers. They're younger people. Have a lot of energy around this. They're not a facility. So the neat part is that because they're already person-centered, right? So it's kind of built in. It's not like trying to take an institutional mindset of a very large departments and, people fearful for their jobs because their department might go away, things like that.
Sure.
So that is a mindset culture change. The residential assisted living comes from family, home concept and adding service and care to it. Looks the same, feels the same, often has the same components. I was just working on a nursing home modular today, and I was going through the licensing code. It's very similar. The smaller the household, whether it's skilled nursing or assisted living. But this allows for something to be embedded in a neighborhood. So like if you were already living in a neighborhood and you had a single family home that now takes care of 8 people in your community, you would actually have that as an option. Some folks use it for very end time high level dementia when they just can't manage at home anymore. So there's Legato Living. That's a model out of Nebraska. Several people have worked with those folks and worked through that as their model of care for a very high level of care that's needed toward end time. So as we're talking about that, then you have if you're in your home and you can manage some of it, but you can't manage all of it, right? So sometimes I feel like I can't manage mine. When you start looking at it, the one model that we see is the village to village. This started up in Beacon Hill in Boston, and they have them all over the country now. And it's basically the idea that you need a little bit of service and support. And so it's a membership model, kind of like AARP. And you buy into the model, but you have a concierge of service or somewhat of a coordinator. So the one story that always sticks in my head, there was a woman at a conference that I was at, and I said, well, why did you join the Village to Village Network in Beacon Hill? And she goes, I live in a carriage house and I have a huge door that I slide open that I get, and that's how I get into my carriage house. She goes, and in bad weather, it has a tendency of sticking, or I can't get the lock to work. And I'm so fearful I'm going to have to move out of my lovely environment that I love living in because I can't get in. So she basically connected herself with the village to village model. She has a whole list of locksmiths that are on demand, then will come and make sure that she can get in. And she was over that peace of mind, right? So some of the village to village models have barter trade. So I take you to the doctor this week. You take me to the doctor in 2 weeks, like that kind of thing. Others have just complete pay for service. So it can be whatever the community needs. Locally here, we have Columbia, which was a Rouse project that was a planned community development, kind of like Reston and some of the other areas. And they have the villages already. So they call theirs something different, but they already had the village center. So they just made that complement the village center to be able to have a village to village model.
Is that a national model, Jane?
Yeah, it's been used nationally. We've been looking at it. We call it wellness coordination, it's something prettier than that. Well, it is wellness coordination program, I think is what we've been calling it. And it's basically having somebody that you can call that is very well, like say you had 5 different transportation options, but you don't know which one you apply for and which one you're eligible to use. Well, my God, you get onto those websites and it's like so deep and so you can't figure that out. So you need someone who says, okay, what do you need? You need transportation to the doctor, you're 65 plus, and you have this ability or disability. Okay, these are the 2 groups we can call. I'll schedule this one. They'll be there at, 4:30 tomorrow.
Right.
It's the person who it's a good daughter is what we often say. It's that person who can help coordinate that just the service you need. So it lets people stay longer, right? So it might be that you need a little bit of housekeeping. You need someone to drop off your groceries. And the thing with COVID that helped was that we have all those delivery services that we didn't have before. And we have Uber and Lyft, which we didn't have, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't really super robust.
Instacart.
Yeah, Instacart.
Amazing. Yeah.
So in rural areas, what I learned is that the reason there's no Uber and Lyft in like Western Maryland, where I've been working, is because there's no garages that have been approved by Uber and Lyft to support the drivers. So not hard, just no one's putting the right to make it happen. So there is somebody who's looking into that now through a grant program through the Community Economic Development Corporation. So that's one way of helping people stay at home. The other one that I love and I think is way underutilized is adult daycare or adult day health care. So the difference between adult daycare, it's a social program. Adult day health care program is for both your outpatient care as well as your standard care, and it can be reimbursed because of that. So Medicare can help offset the cost for that. And then there's something called PACE, which is the Program for All-Inclusive Care of the Elderly. It's a wraparound service. So it's like having that wellness coordinator coupled with a clinic, coupled with social programs, coupled with all of it. That center then becomes responsible for that person's healthcare. So it's in their best interest to make sure that person stays as healthy as possible, because if that person then requires a nursing home, it's on PACE to pay for it. So
interesting.
Yeah. So it's the only wellness model we really have that's federally funded. The problem is that there's a limitation in many states. Like we have a new one that just went to, it's amazing. It took 20 years or more to get, Hopkins had the first allotment for it. And I don't know that geriatrician services were quite as much their focus as say cancer would be. So, but there's a new one in West Baltimore. It's amazing, has transportation, has all the different pieces and parts. I'm really excited for them to get that open. We've got 2 more in the state of Maryland. We're hoping for rural Maryland, but it didn't come through.
It's an interesting concept and program. In Chicago, they have PACE as well, but it's all about the transportation. So it is basically a transportation service for 65 plus, and there's a very minimal fee attached to taking you from point A to point B, but it's really all about transportation. They don't have the additional services that you were talking about. And that would be an amazing thing to see that rolled out nationally.
Yeah, we see them in North Carolina. We've seen a lot in Colorado. Some states are more progressive with it than others.
But it's all under the PACE banner, which I think is
the programs
interesting.
for all inclusive care. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you'll see PACE means different things in different places too. Sometimes, same with senior centers. Like in Baltimore City, we have something called AIM, and it's under the senior center auspices, but it's basically a transportation service. So other people use that to get to the actual physical location of other places.
Interesting.
Yeah. Our senior services are incredibly fractured. If we think that acute care service and outpatient is fractured, senior services are the most fractured segment of our healthcare system.
Let's move away from a lot of care in the model and let's go to a different demographic who are still very active and engaged and want to continue learning and maybe giving back to the community, exchange with students. There's a new university opportunity, and I would love for you to speak to that model because I think it's growing in leaps and bounds. And although it started at Arizona State University a number of years ago, it's all of a sudden recently picked up a lot of speed. And every time I turn around, I seem to be reading about another one of these. So take it away.
Yeah, I love the university-based retirement community, or age-friendly communities is what they're called. There's actually a acronym, EBRC and AFC. And the very first one that I ever went to was LaSalle Village, and it's been around for over 20 years. It's up in the Boston area. It's in Needham, and it's on the campus of the retirement community. It was built on the university campus, and I believe it was a land grant. So you have like all these tax structures and stuff, and universities speak. And so the only way they could do that was to make all the residents students. And people said, "Oh, this is going to fail." Blah, blah, blah. Well, obviously didn't fail. They had to take a certain number of hours every year or teach or whatever, however, to fulfill that. So we've seen some really amazing examples of it. Mirabella that you mentioned in Arizona is another really wonderful place. We have a new one here that they're working on between Goucher College and Edenwald. Edenwald's the retirement community, Goucher is the university. Little concerned about whether they're just going to try to co-locate versus actually program, because programming, you have to bring people together, like we talked about earlier, to kind of bring them together to kind of make it work. So our proposed
and they also have this one in upstate New York. It's a SUNY campus at Purchase.
Yeah.
And so, each one operates a little differently, is my understanding. Some of them, yes, you can take classes, but some of them you can actually mentor students. And all of them, it seems that the senior residents, whether they're in independent living, in a high-rise model, or in a townhouse type or a villa model, they all are able to participate in the arts and the sports programming and the various things offered on campus as if they were students, which I think is fabulous.
Right. It gives you the structure to and the framework to not repeat services or activities or things that are already available. So Live Together is our nonprofit. We have a two-pronged approach. One is to do demonstration projects of intergenerational living. The other part is for workforce development because we think it's coupled, but it's also part of the student population. So the project we've been working on is called the Cambridge Residences. It's an empty student hall on Frostburg State University's campus. And the president at the time, we'd done a walkthrough and he goes, "Can you please tell me what to do with this building?" So we came back to him with a proposal. We're working on the performance now. We got our construction dollars back and about the cost, and it's increased over the last year and a half. We've been working on the project. But basically, it's 40 apartments for students, graduates, older adults, and families. And it has one household of residential assisted living. And it has one across from that household is the social work department. So the social work department allows us to bring the nursing department and the physiology department together to do building, right? So we have this opportunity to do building of class groups and teams, and they get to do their practicum with older adults, right? So
I love that.
it covers the whole continuum. And then we were working with some students from Marymount. My friend Laura Benson, she's one of our advisors, and she and her students have opened up my experiential brain better because you get kind of loaded down with what does it cost and where's the connection and how do I get the utilities to compromise, things like that. And she opened it back up. So we looked at it and said, okay, so let's look at this whole quad as an opportunity. So we call it the Cambridge Commons, and we added gardens and playgrounds and other stuff as a proposal for the land between the dining facility or area,
Right.
the building. And so this gave us a whole different way of looking at the world. And so we also want the first floor to be engagement. So you bring people from the outside in. So whether that's the food pop-up, that's some type of learning pop-up, whatever, in addition to giving back, having people come in. And we want it to be a destination. It's like on the far side of the campus. So in the city of Frostburg is a little bit, it's not as though the city kind of rolls naturally into the campus. So you'd have to make it more of a destination if you were going to do that. So I also think that we started out with the premise instead of co-locating. We started out with the premise of here's an asset that's underutilized or not used. How can we make that into an asset that would be intergenerational? So extension is a little bit different. The state called us a unicorn. So we're still working on what that structure is going to be looking like. So, but I think that this project has huge potential. And we've been working with the Allegheny College as well out there. It's a community college 2-year program. They have an allied health program. They have everybody we need. They have
That's fantastic.
PT, text. They have culinary. They have all of it. Hands-on modality. They got it all.
So people who want to have a different, more engaging living environment that still gives them the type of services they need or want, there are, so many more options. And this particular option gives them that campus feel, if you will. They don't have to wax euphoric about their past years at university. They can actually go back to the university. It's just a different chapter for them there. Let's talk about maybe one more really interesting alternative model. I think that's probably all we have time for today. And we'll continue the conversation after that because there are so many things other than just going to straight up traditional independent living, assisted living, or memory care. And they could be more interesting to both the families and to the potential residents. So what do you think would be the last one that we want to close out on?
I think the idea of doing niche-based communities is really
Love that.
amazing. And I love it because it's affinity-based. This is similar to the dementia villages too that have been developed in Europe, and we're starting to see a little bit of that in the United States. And it's basically the idea that people are living in a community that they don't know they have memory care issues. They just go to the store because the store's there, but it's actually, has staff that works there so that they can do an exchange. So but their households are based on affinities. So it could be food, it could be art, it could be culture, it could be almost anything. I also think that focusing on developmentally disabled is naturally intergenerational, kind of interesting, but it also helps people maximize their abilities. And I think that in any way we can do that. I mean, and the thing is with folks that have cognitive impairment. You only have the moment. So like if I have a really good day with my mom and dad, I'm like, yeah, this will be good. It'll last for a while. It doesn't last because they go
Right.
to moment. So you're always kind of racking your brain trying to come up with the next great moment to moment, right?
Right.
It can be something fairly simple is what I've also been learning. Because I thought I knew quite a bit. I know nothing when I actually. The other group that's done some beautiful work is the LGBTQ plus community. And we know that there's a community up in New England that has been developed, and it's has a community center for all ages to come into. It's not age restricted. It's intergenerational. It's just, I think it's amazing. It's called Pride, PRYD. And it's amazing. And there's also communities in Arizona and other areas too that have been looking at this in terms of the focus of the affinity. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, that's not equal enough. And I'm like, well, there are certain groups that affinity wise, it works better. So if you have first generation Koreans in our community, for example, they're more comfortable with Korean food, Korean culture. Not so much the caregivers, but Korean caregivers, because they can speak the language, particularly if English is their second language. So I think that there's a lot of ways of looking at that that's not meant to be limiting, but supportive of the community and the local part. Because I think that we miss sometimes the subtlety that if you cookie cutter something across the country, it doesn't apply to the residents on a green field base, on that green based, bottom line, local, let's get to the, nitty.
Well, you're going to miss a lot of people. You're just going to miss a lot of people because they don't have that comfort level. And that's why these niche communities are so important because whether they're faith-based or whether they're, culturally based, it is important for people to be able to age gracefully with the people they're most comfortable with.
It gives them some choices that maybe that is community based to their needs.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I love that. Well, I think those are all great models, things that people should really think about when they're looking to find a place that will best accommodate their family and their family members who are going to maybe leave their home. We haven't even touched on aging in place. That is a whole topic unto itself. We've done some other podcasts on that. We will continue to talk about that and maximizing those efforts. But we will come back and talk about alternative typologies in senior living again and very soon, because that is a big topic right now and should be, because one size doesn't fit all. Jane, thank you so much for joining me today on ALC Chats. I look forward to seeing you back here soon for more compelling conversation around the senior living space.
Thank you, Phoebe. It's always a pleasure. You take care.
Thank you, you too.